Hi everyone, thank you all so much for coming tonight. My name is Bex. I am the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic, and we're so excited to have Julia Turshen and Helen Rosner here with us tonight to celebrate what goes with what. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping notes to go over. We'll be doing a hand-raised Q&A at the end, so think of questions, hold on to them tight, we'll get them answered. Afterwards, Julia will be signing and personalizing near where you checked in. We will let you know when and where to line up for that. If you're with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy of What Goes With What online using the link in the description. So the reason we are all here tonight, what goes with what? In this book, Julia offers readers a new way to think about cooking, one that focuses on mastering the alchemy of a meal, and then offers endless iterations organized into 6 sections. Julia arms readers with 20 charts and 100 recipes that teach them how to build a successful dish, while making ample room for creativity and personal preference. I can say from personal experience, I have some of Julia's cookbooks, and there's nothing you can't do once you make the meal, and it's incredible. And I didn't know food could do that. So our star of the show tonight, Julia Turshen, is the best-selling author of 5 cookbooks and co-author of several more. She hosts the podcast Keep Calm and Cook On and has written for The Times, The Post, Vogue, Bon Appetit, and much more. She lives in Hudson Valley with her spouse, Grace, and their many pets. And our conversation extraordinaire, lovely friend of the store, Helen Rosner, is a staff writer at The New Yorker. She has won a bunch of James Beard Awards.
Redacted.
Got a lot of crossed out lines. You know her, you love her. You love them all. Without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Julia.
That was a great intro. I felt like my bio was too long. This is all about Julia. You guys don't need to hear about like every magazine I've ever worked for. It's like I work at The New Yorker. I won an award one time. It was cool. We're here for Julia. I also, before we get into this, I'm going to take a brief indulgence of my own anxieties and let you know that the reason I'm holding a cookbook up like this is because I usually write out my questions or print them out because I think holding a phone while you're talking to somebody on stage looks lame. And I didn't remember to bring my printout, so I'm holding my phone behind me. And it makes me feel classy. So, Julia, I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm the hugest Julia Turshen fan. I love your books. They're so good. This is so exciting for me. I'm like blushing and fangirling out a little bit. I love this book too. How many, just so that we can sort of calibrate our conversation, how many of you, show of hands, have already either read through or cooked from this book? Okay, so a very small number. So we're going to assume that this is new to you, which is thrilling because this book is so good and so different and kind of will blow your brain wide open about how you approach cooking and recipes. And I feel like maybe a great place to start is with that itself. Julia, can you tell us about the structural and philosophical conceit of what goes with what?
Sure. Thank you all so much for coming. This is so wonderful. I've got some family here, and that's really exciting. And I'm a big Helen Rosner fan, so this is very exciting for me. I feel like when I was in high school, I would sometimes hide a copy of Gourmet magazine in like a math textbook during class, so I feel like this is very familiar.
I might give up on it after a little bit. It's like definitely trying my wrists a little.
No one thinks you look lame.
I don't, and I'm
Raise your hand if you think Helen looks lame. No hands. No. Yeah, we're good. What did you ask me? The book. Okay.
The book is it's a cookbook with recipes that you can just sit down and cook from, but they are structured.
It's a little different.
In a little bit of a different way. Tell us about that little different way.
Yeah, happily. I've worked on lots of cookbooks, but this one, to me, feels really different. And I think what sets this one apart are a few things, but mainly these charts. So the book has 20 charts. And the charts, if you haven't seen them, they're all just one page. And at the top, they give you like a little formula, a little kind of roadmap for how to make whatever the topic is of that chart. So it's things like, salad dressings, pastas, sheet pan meals, grain bowls, like sauteed chicken dishes. I feel like the things like me and my fellow home cooks Google all the time. And so you get this little formula, and then underneath that formula, you have 5 examples. So you see how that formula can be put to work. And then there's recipes for each of those examples. So that's where you get the 20 charts, 100 recipes. So I think what this book offers that none of my other books have, and what makes me really excited, is it's the first time I've been able to, I think, show you what I've been trying to tell you for my whole career, which is that recipes are flexible and like cooking is flexible. And I just fear the pressure a lot of home cooks feel when they see a recipe and they feel like it's this really strict thing. It's like a prescription that you have to follow exactly. And then if something happens, because things happen, because there's so many variables in our kitchens and just person to person and ingredient to ingredient, people get worried. And I just feel like there's enough to be worried about. Like, we don't have to be worried about cooking at home.
I think seeing these like systems and patterns articulated so clearly was kind of mind exploding for me, because there are things, I'm a pretty seasoned home cook, and it's the kind of knowledge that feels really exciting to suddenly realize when you're like in your third or 17th year of cooking meatballs or chicken breast or whatever, to suddenly be like, oh wait, like this does actually have structure. Like I have a very clear memory of the moment when I was at a very fancy dinner early in my food writing career, where we were served a course of foie gras with a sauterne gelée, and all of a sudden I realized this is peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
Like this is a formula. Like we have brioche, we have foie gras, we have like fancy wine jam, and that's just peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. And I feel like what you've done here in the book is to just lay that out, a sense of knowledge that I think is often really the reward from years and years and years of effort. And you're just like, screw that.
Yeah.
You can just know the secret.
Yeah.
And opening it up like that, like upending it, feels very pedagogical to me, right? Like it feels like the way a teacher might approach something.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, because you have become such a beloved and influential teacher with your Sunday Zoom classes. How does that experience as a teacher change the way you think about writing recipes and speaking to your readers?
Yeah, great question. Has anyone here ever taken one of my classes? Yeah. Oh, exciting. Yeah, I thought some people looked familiar. So yeah, I started teaching these online classes after my last book came out, because it came out still in earlier days of COVID, and all the promotion was online. And I used to really hate doing cooking demos. They made me feel so nervous and sweaty and awkward, and I'd be in some random place with people just watching me cook. Watching me talk feels different. I'm like, wait, it's the same. No, it's not. And when I got the opportunity to do it from home, everything changed, because I was in my home kitchen, which is my favorite place to be. And most importantly, everyone, and those of you who have been to class know, you're in your home kitchen. Some people just watch, but many people cook with me. And it's a really different way to teach, and I think a very different way to learn, because as opposed to just watching, you're doing it along with me. You're having this like lived, embodied experience in the place where you're going to continue to cook. So you're using your equipment, you're in your space, we're troubleshooting together. Like if something's not working, you can show me and we'll talk about it. So that's just a little context for what the classes are like. But in terms of, I think, what it's brought to my writing style, my recipe writing style, is just, I guess, a couple things. One is that I get to have this ongoing conversation with so many of you. Like I get to see you all the time and actually talk to you, and not imagine what is hard for you in your kitchen or what you're enjoying, but to actually like ask you. And I think this book really reflects a lot of that conversation. I also find in teaching, where I'm just like standing in my kitchen talking, I get to say so much. I just talk and talk and talk. And without the restriction of a page, and without the restriction of someone looking at a page that's like filled with text and that feeling like intimidating when you're in your kitchen, if I'm telling you things, I can give you so much information, hopefully without it feeling too overwhelming. Or I can check in and be like, is this overwhelming? Because like, let's bring it down. And in book writing, it's different. And I know the experience of opening a cookbook and there's just so much text on the page, and I just am like, oh, not even looking at that one. But a lot of that text could just be like helpful information. But I'm intimidated by the amount, I would say. So I feel like teaching has taught me how much I want to convey all this extra information, things like substitutions, variations, kind of revealing the formula, like this is what's happening here. And so I wanted to bring that into this book, but not have it feel overwhelming. So I think that's a big part of where the charts come in, because I think it's the kind of thing where if you like look at it, it just makes a lot of sense. But in describing it, I told you kind of the form they take, but I guess the other things to know is each chart is just one page, which was intentional, only 5 examples. They're all in my handwriting, which I point out because they're not spreadsheets. Like, that's a really different thing. Like, I didn't want it to
not
be
like
too much.
intimidating engineer style.
Yeah,
like,
no.
no.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess, does that answer your question?
It does. And, it also leads into something else I wanted to ask you about. So you have, as you do with so many of your books, some lovely like essays and kind of bonus material sprinkled throughout. And there's a really wonderful essay in the book about cooking while queer and queer cooking. And I was reading it and being like, this is lovely. I love this. I love this. And then all of a sudden you said something that just like knocked my socks off, where you said these charts are so queer. And of course, like they absolutely are. And it made instant perfect sense. And I want to hear you say more about it, because you said it and it made perfect sense, but I want to hear it in your words.
So one of the other reasons I think this book is different than my other books is I do believe it's the queerest book I've written. And it might not be obvious, but there's a few reasons, and a big one are these charts. And I guess I probably said it better in the book than whatever I'm about to say. We'll find out. But I basically feel like, I don't know, the older I get, the longer, hi, that's Jordan. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, Jordan.
Sorry to embarrass you. I guess the older I get, the more books I write, which happens the older I get. Something that's happening simultaneously is that I am just always, every day, I'm just increasingly happier and delighted to be a queer person in this world. And I think for me, what that means is having just like a queer lens on life. And if that's not something you've experienced yourself, I mean, I really recommend it. And what it means for me is that I go through life just pausing at all the kind of junctions where things are just, it seems like a lot of people are just doing things the way that they feel like they should be doing things. And I like to pause at those moments and just be like, do I like this option? Do I want a different option? Does this work for me? Are there more options here? And I might choose that option lots of other people are choosing, but I just give myself that opportunity. And that, to me, is like a very queer approach to living, to just pause and consider, I don't know, more abundance and less, I guess, prescription. So it is very much how I approach cooking. I feel like what I just said applies to the charts. And, the charts themselves, I think they're showing you how I constantly queer food. Like, I'm constantly thinking about like other options, other avenues to take. And I think equipping readers with the charts is equipping them with the knowledge to be flexible and like riff on things and not feel like they have to do things like a very particular way, and have a bit more like fluidity. And I'm trying to think of more queer terms to assign to it. But I do think that they represent my outlook, which is like specifically like a really queer one. And I don't think this book is necessarily like an obvious pride flag. Like, it's not, I mean, it's colorful, but it's like not wrapped in like a rainbow. But I do think it's like an inherently very queer book, and that makes me really excited and proud.
Yeah. Another thread that runs through the book that is really striking is your relationship with your body and with bodies in general. And you wrote in the introduction that like you're constantly engaged in trying to divest from diet culture, and you did something very interesting with the yields in this book, which maybe you could tell us a little bit about.
Sure. Happily. Thank you for asking about that, because I love talking about this. So another thing that's happened in my life while working on this book is, in addition to just like enjoying my queerness, is me continuing to kind of unravel a very long personal history of having an eating disorder, and unraveling my I would say relationship to diet culture, and just understanding what it is and what my role has been in it, and how it's impacted me. And I guess for anyone who is unfamiliar with that term, I guess, I mean, I'd be curious how you define it, but to me, diet culture is like, it's like the air we're all breathing. And it basically is the thing that has taught us that like being fat is a really bad thing. And fatness is like a really unworthy thing. And I think that's been really ingrained in us. And a lot of people profit off of that. And it's just like this huge system. So that's like a tidy little thing. But yeah, so in me looking at this constantly and figuring out like how has it affected me? Where am I complicit in it? One of the places I found is something I wasn't expecting, and it was in the serving sizes I put on recipes. And I just spent some time thinking about it because I was like, when I say serves 4, what am I actually saying? And I realized I didn't know because I don't know who those 4 people are. I don't know if they're children or they're like professional athletes, like training for something. I don't know what they ate just before they're eating whatever this recipe is. I don't know how hungry they are. I don't know what their plans are later. Like there's so much and I just don't know. So I toyed with the idea of doing away with the serving sizes. So I was like, maybe we just don't need them. I just give you the recipe and you've got it. But then I thought, I'm very familiar with like looking at a recipe, seeing, I'll just use soup for an example, seeing how much like broth or water is in the soup and having an idea of how much soup this is going to be. But then I thought about, okay, what if, I don't know, a single person is cooking from the book, is making a soup that they just want to have for dinner like one night by themselves, and they end up with like 6 quarts of soup. Like I didn't want to put someone in that position. So, I did my little queer pause and I just thought like, is there another option here? So what I chose to do was wherever I could in the book, I just told you how much something made, not how many people it would serve, not what a serving size was. I don't think that's for me to determine. So like with the soups, I told you like how many quarts each recipe makes. And just like you go to a prepared food store and buy a quart of soup, you can decide, how many people that is for or what it's for. And then there's places where, things don't fit so easily in a quart container, like, I don't know, like a cake. So on any recipe where I couldn't give you the volume, I just used the word about. I just said serves about 4 or 6 or 2 or however many. Because I just wanted to, give you some information so you weren't like totally surprised by the outcome, but have that information be a little bit more, I think, flexible and like kind and without any like assumption. Because for one of the places I've tripped up is when I have like eaten the whole amount of something that says serves more than, one portion or something. And that's made me feel not great. And I don't want to be part of that for anyone else.
I wrote a recipe a long time ago for a soup called Roberto.
Famous, yeah.
That went kind of viral, and the recipe says it serves 2 because I would make it for my husband, and the 2 of us would eat it, and we would eat like 2 pretty huge bowls of it, and we'd eat most of the pot, and then and I get a lot of feedback on this recipe, most of which is quite wonderful, but like at least once a week I get an email or a note from somebody saying, how much are you eating? This serves 6. And I'm like, well, we're, I don't know, 2 hungry adults eating dinner. This is me. This is my recipe. I cook this for 2 people. Like, and it's a really vulnerable interaction, I think, on both sides of the equation, to realize that maybe like I assessed other people incorrectly and other people to feel like they are being seen wrong. So it feels really important, I think, to like take that queer pause and be like, who are we serving with the serving size? Totally.
And I think another part of it that's not so directly related to diet culture, and I didn't write about this in the book, but I also think, and this is like a whole tangent that I feel like you and I could talk a lot about, but we don't have to. But like, I think cookbooks have often been seen as like, I don't know, I think they're relegated to a different place in books in general. They're often seen as sort of not as literary, and I think they're often seen in the sphere of like, they're just for women. And it's just like this domestic guide thing. And so another thing that happens with the serving sizes, I think, is that I think the most common serving size you see is 4, and I think that usually is just furthering this like heteronormative, like those 4 people are usually like a husband, a wife, and 2 kids, and that's not reflective of my life. And it's not reflective. Like when you wrote that recipe,
Yeah.
I know it was before you had your kid. Like,
But even now, we're
Yeah.
not a husband and a wife and two
two
kids.
kids.
We're,
Yeah.
like a tiny toddler who
Yeah.
eats like a linebacker.
My kind of girl. I just think it's nice to shake it up. Like I do, instead of trying to get all the recipes in the book to serve the same amount of people, I like to like have some that serve 2, some that serve 6, because it's just reflective of how I cook and eat. Like sometimes I'm just cooking for myself, sometimes I'm cooking for me and my spouse, sometimes I'm cooking for family that comes over, and I think that's true for lots of us. Like we cook for different amounts of people.
I was especially moved by the conversation with your mother that you include in the book. It's a dialogue between the two of you where you're talking about body image and how women think about bodies and how parents transmit information about body size and body satisfaction and dissatisfaction to their children. And it's a really incredible conversation in a lot of ways. Like I cannot imagine having a conversation like that with my mom, not because of any problem with either of us, but just because the level of trust and vulnerability that both you and your mother have in this conversation is extraordinary. Why does something like that belong in a cookbook?
Yeah, great question. I feel like it belongs in a cookbook because a cookbook is a place we talk about food and feeding ourselves. So I think it's totally a place where we're talking about our relationships to our body and our weight and our body image. I mean, food has always been intertwined with both of those things for me. So to me, it feels completely appropriate. It might feel a little surprising, but to me, it feels like the perfect place to put that conversation. I also think there's something very powerful about putting a conversation like that. I don't know, putting so much queerness in the book, like putting these things in something as familiar as a cookbook. I think cookbooks, sometimes, I have some feelings I just told you about how cookbooks are seen, but I also think they're like incredibly powerful because they're just welcomed into people's homes and lives like no other form of media I can think of. Like cookbooks can be given to so many different generations, and I always like have this, it's not a good joke, but this joke of like, it's a book you always know is going to end well. Like it's like a happy, you go to this happy safe place when you open a cookbook. So I think it's like a really, I don't know, ripe place to put, I think, some important and like vulnerable messages. I think you're tending to talk to people when they're at their most relaxed and feeling safe, and I think that's a nice place to talk about this stuff.
It's like a kind of Trojan horse.
Yeah.
I like that. There's another dialogue in the book too with you and your mother and your cousin Ivy.
Who's sitting right there.
Oh my gosh, hey, cousin Ivy. I think you're really cool based on this dialogue. You are very funny and charming.
She is. Yes, I agree.
Where your mom and cousin Ivy are talking about your grandparents' bakery, which no longer exists. And there was something that your mom said in the course of this conversation that really stuck with me, where she was talking about how when she was a teenager, she loved growing up in the bakery, and then when she was a teenager, all of a sudden she was overcome with this sense of embarrassment about it, and this feeling that coming out of a bakery was not sophisticated enough or intellectual enough, and that her peers all wanted to aim for things bigger, and she suddenly became painfully aware of the fact that the bakery was not who she wanted to be in that moment. And she came back around later in life to loving it. But that emotion felt really powerful to me, and especially in the context of it appearing in a cookbook written by her daughter. Like her life, her legacy has circled back into the world of food. And I think that the way that food exists within culture now is very different. I think coming from a family that owns a bakery today, in what year is it, 2024, lands very differently than it might have, 40 or 50 years ago. Do you think about that sort of circledness of it all? Like, do you feel connected to the bakery even though you weren't there? Do you feel like you claim it?
Yes.
It's a big question.
No. I'm just so glad you're here. I feel like, and I wrote about this a bit. My grandparents, who I never had the fortune to know, ran a bakery here in Brooklyn. Ivy, my cousin, grew up there with all my other cousins, my mom, my aunts, everyone worked there. And I feel like, I don't know, my mom is first generation in this country, and she and I talk a lot about like the journey her parents took to come here, knowing they would never go back to this place they were from. And that's not my experience. I'm not first generation. but I feel, when she talks about that, I feel this great sense of, like, I feel like I understand, because I feel like my whole life and a lot of my career writing about food and stuff is like this attempt to get back to this place I'll never be able to go. And so, yes, I feel very, very connected. And I think it's really fascinating, yeah, the changes that you're talking about, because, yeah, it was something that felt like at a certain point in my mom's life, like basically at the age she was, like when I guess I never thought about this, but like when I probably started working like professionally in cookbooks and writing about food, that was around probably the age when she felt like the most distance and like the least proud. So I think it's incredible that, you know, we're able to come this sort of full circle way, and I get to write about this thing with, yeah, so much pride, and get so much acknowledgement for it. I mean, you're all showing up here on a Friday night when you could be doing so many other things. You know, I feel like it's all of us who I think really appreciate this thing.
It does feel connected too to what you were saying about how cookbooks are often, I think, sort of siloed into this idea of like being for women, domesticity, and not just being for women or being about domesticity, but also the implication that those are somehow less than things that are not specifically for women or not specifically about the domestic sphere. And this, I think, not to put all of it on you, but I think you're one of the people who's really articulating this so clearly through your work and through your writing, to kind of demystify cooking, de-preciousize cooking, helps, I think, make it less rarefied in a way that is also quite liberating for the people who do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't have to just be something that is secret knowledge that, like, the, you know, prototypical, like, caveman husband can never know. Like, no, it's actually, like, pretty easy.
Yeah.
You just have to want to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a circle in that,
too. No, totally. And I basically feel like I'm stressed out about everything except for cooking. It's like the one place I don't feel anxious, and I just feel really anxious everywhere else. And I know how uncommon that is. Not the anxiety, but the anti-anxiety that I feel in the kitchen. This is the place, like when I'm cooking, especially when I'm just making dinner at home for me and Grace, like that specifically, that just like everyday, day-to-day cooking, not the holiday cooking, just the like day in, day out, like that is when I feel just like my most, just like confident and not like confident in an ego way, like just calm, like, oh, I've got this, like this is not stressful. And because that's literally a part of my day-to-day life, it actually happens more than once a day, because I cook we live in the middle of nowhere, we like never go out to eat. I have access to that on a daily basis, and it's such an important part of my life, and I just want that feeling to be held by as many people as possible, as often as possible. And I think there's a lot of power in just day-to-day home cooking. And I think that taking the pressure valve off of it, like the pressure to make the food just beautiful or to make a new thing each time, like I just feel like just forget all that. Like I eat a lot of leftovers. I eat a lot of like peanut butter and jelly, like just really simple stuff that's like really satisfying. You know, I think about before I could afford to just write about food for a living, I worked for many years as a private chef, which meant like really rich people would pay me to like be in their home cooking. And I think about the fact that I would never, like, I think that sounds like amazing to lots of people, and I just would never want that because I don't want every meal I eat to be precious, and I don't want every meal I eat to be amazing. Like I feel like I say the following phrase all the time, so forgive me because I know I'm a broken record, but I just really think like not every meal we eat has to be the best meal we ever had. And like back to my relationship with my body, it's also part of that, because I want eating in my life to feel just like cooking. Like I want it to feel relaxed and calm and just like part of my day-to-day life, like no big deal. And so I think being in the position I am as someone who gets to write books and, you know, sit here in this room, I just feel like it's important to say all that. Like, yes, I'll give you recipes for maybe things you haven't tried before, but also like, it's fine if you just want to make the things you always make. Like it doesn't matter to me what you make. I just want you to feel good doing it. Yeah.
I'm curious about this evolution in you, sort of away from, not that you were ever like the world's most like fetishizing precision cook, but I feel like, you know, something that you write in this book and that you and I have talked about before is that kind of as we've become more and more seasoned and more comfortable with home cooking, we're much more like laissez-faire, right? Like whatever, just like throw in some salt. Oh, you don't have lemon? Like throw in lime. You don't have lime? Add some vinegar. Like, and this is a sort of haphazardness or a freedom that comes from knowledge. But it also is something that I think at the core of this book is something you're trying to transmit, right? Like to tell cooks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this book, well, everybody can cook from it, and I have cooked from it, and it's wonderful, and I'm a good cook, but like, I feel like it's pitched to a beginner. Like you're speaking to someone who might not know literally anything, which makes it a really accessible conversational entry point, but you're also trying to say, like, you don't need to know anything, you kind of already know. Like, add salt until it tastes right. Like, you know the answer. I mean, it's very like Dumbo's magic feather. Like, the answer is within you. Like, how do you teach people to trust themselves when cooking can seem terrifying?
I don't know if I fully know the answer to that, but I think I try over and over. And I think one of the things I try to do is I don't think I'm the person anyone requires the following from, but I like to just offer permission all the time, because I think I know for me, there's a lot of things in my life where I'm like, if someone is just like, it's okay if you try this, like, that's all I need to hear to try it. So I try to offer permission if that's helpful for anyone to hear. I also think just reminding everyone, including myself, like, sometimes the way you figure out how much salt something needs is you add too much. Like, sometimes you have to like cross a boundary to find where the boundary is, and to just remind us all that, like, that's okay. Like, it's okay if your food's a little salty. Like, there's ways to correct that. Or like, you had a salty thing and it's like not the end of the world. Like, so I think just having that attitude, I hope is helpful. And I think, being really, I don't know, transparent, like offering, like what you're saying before, like what the charts offer and the sort of confidence comes with like years of experience. And I've been cooking at home for decades. And I don't know another way. Like, that's how I became a confident home cook. But I don't think you need to be as obsessed with home cooking as I am to be a confident home cook. So, I mean, I enjoy it, but it's not everyone's roadmap. So I just tried to tell you everything I know. Like, I feel so fortunate that I've been able to make a job out of that, just to tell you everything I know about this. And like, as I learn more, tell you more. Like, it's amazing. So I feel a lot like, I'll tell you so you don't have to, oversalt things a million times like I have. Just, I'll tell you how I do it. So not that you have to do it my way, but so that you can just have that information. I don't know. I think this might seem really out of left field. So when I'm not cooking, my main hobby is powerlifting. I'm really into it.
Yeah, they're totally connected.
Connected.
No, they are. I feel like they absolutely make sense to me as things that go together, because it's about doing what you can do.
Yeah, okay.
It's like look what I can make, look what I can do. Like, in both of them, it is about like connecting your body to the world outside of you, and like nourishment and growth, and just like inhabiting the physical world.
Yes.
So there you go.
Great. Okay, I'm glad this is being recorded so I can write that down. I'll credit you. That was great. I bring it up because I just think there's some interesting parallels, and you could pick any, I don't know, niche thing that has a lot of details with it, but powerlifting is the one I know. Like, I think a lot about, so powerlifting is a weightlifting sport, and I think a lot about the feeling I felt when I walked into a powerlifting gym for the first time. I think it's how a lot of people feel when they walk into the grocery store. Like, there's so much stuff there. I don't necessarily know how to use everything. I feel like I could do something where something could go wrong. There feels like there's so many options. Like, how do I organize a lifting workout? Like, and, I have a powerlifting coach, and I think of him as like, oh, is this how some people feel when they like read one of my cookbooks? Like,
yes, you're a coach.
He knows all this.
You're Coach Julia.
Coach Julia.
There's your next book.
Oh my God.
You can have a whistle.
I've always wanted a whistle. I actually have one because so when I was in When I was in 5th grade, I was voted safety patrol captain, which I took as a lifetime appointment. And I have, it's in my bag in the other room. I have this whistle that is
right now
attached to my keys because I go for walks
Okay.
and hikes alone a lot, and I feel like
It's like a big emotional roller
I
coaster.
feel like if something happens, I'm not very loud. So
But you're a
I
safety
need
captain.
But I need a whistle.
You're
So I have a whistle.
we have to. You're the safety captain, not only of all of us, but of your own life. That's beautiful. I think we have to go to audience questions.
yeah.
But wait, you had a point that you were getting to. Hold on. Let's circle in that.
Yeah, Coach Julia, and I think, there's just like, whatever. Anyway, it's just like with weightlifting, like the way Matt sees the gym, and he understands how bodies work and how strength works. And he can say like, oh, I don't know, like sometimes I get a lower back thing, like, oh, that's bothering me today, like we'll do this instead of that. Like that kind of ease in that space. That's what I feel with cooking and want people to feel that strength. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful point for us to transition into audience questions. Please raise your hand if you have questions. Do you want to call in people or should I?
You can do it.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then I'll repeat the questions back for the folks on the live stream. So questions, folks, raise those hands. All right, right here in the front.
It's not exactly a question, it's more of a plea. I was wondering if you would ever write a children's cookbook. My kids love your classes. We've emailed. And I have a son and I have a young daughter, and the diet culture aspect of everything is always on my mind. It is a huge part of the way I introduce food to them, and she's a little too young to like get sucked into like a cookbook like this, but she loves going to the library and getting cookbooks out, which scares me because I'm like, I'd have to read them first because I don't know what these old cookbooks from like the 80s say in them.
Sure.
So the question, if anybody can hear, was, will Julia please write a children's cookbook specifically keeping in mind how unpredictably diet culture can show up in all sorts of other cookbooks?
I think it's a great idea. I have thought about writing like I had this idea for a kid's book, like a storybook once that never really went anywhere. Like one of the darts I threw against the board. But I love seeing your kids in class. I do some kids classes. For a long time I felt, I don't know, I've thought about kids and cooking because I was a kid who loved to cook and it made such a huge difference in my life. And for a long time I thought that's not something I am allowed to do because I'm not a parent. But I've come to realize that that is false. And I love teaching the kids classes. I also, I have a niece and a nephew, and I have my best friend's kids who I'm their Uncle Julia, and I feel very invested in being an adult in the life of kids that I really care about. And so I think it just has taken me time to be okay with that. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. Okay.
I mean, you specifically, since you're such a Julia fan, probably don't need to hear this, but I think all of your cookbooks, and especially this one, work really beautifully for kids.
Yeah. The thing that you mentioned about it being good for beginners, it's so funny. When I did my first solo cookbook, A Small Victory, so much of the feedback from that book was like, oh, this is a great book for beginners. And it was so funny to me because I'm not upset about that, but I didn't set out to write a book for beginners. I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, okay. And I just want everyone to feel like included. Like in my classes, so many of you have been there. Like every time I chop an onion, I tell you how I'm chopping an onion because it might be the first time someone is doing that. I don't know. And for a lot of, and I'm always like, oh, probably most of you know this. But for this one person who doesn't, who's too scared to ask, like.
I mean, I think we could have a whole separate hour-long conversation about this, but I do think kind of the natural cadence of any cookbook that has any personality at all sort of tends to trend towards writing to beginners because of exactly that.
Yeah.
Because like you don't know how many other pages of the book they're even going to have read, right? Like if you say like on page 13, you say, when I say a pinch of salt, I mean a quarter teaspoon. Like who knows if people are going to read that page. So it is an interesting thing that happens in the cookbook world. More questions? Yes. Yep.
Hi.
I'm curious what recipe you've been taught or inherited has made the biggest difference for you.
The question is, what recipe that you've been taught or that you've inherited has made the biggest difference for you?
Okay, so I'm just on a goal to make my family cry. I would say, without a doubt, Aunt Renee's chicken soup is the recipe. I feel like I was inherited. I don't think she really taught any of us. She just did it, and we got to be there. And yeah, I was just mentioning Small Victories. I put that soup on the cover of Small Victories because you never, when you do a first book, you don't know that you'll be able to do another book. And I just felt like if that was going to be the only book I ever got to write, like that's what had to be cemented on that cover. So that soup, yeah, has made like the biggest difference in my life. And it's like the thing, making homemade chicken soup is, even though it's such a beloved food, like making it like, I feel like the real way, like the Aunt Renee way, is like it's so much time and work. Like straining chicken soup is annoying. It's a lot. So it's more labor than I typically actually like to do. Like there's a recipe in this new book for what I call the fastest chicken noodle soup, and I make it much more frequently, and it's just better than bouillon and like egg noodles, and it's great. It's like perfect. It's not Aunt Renee's soup. So I think about, yeah, a recipe that's like I've inherited that it has impacted me. Like that's the kind of thing I'll take the time to do because it makes me feel just connected to everyone I've come from. Yeah.
We didn't even talk about your love for Better Than Bouillon.
Oh my God, I love it so
There's
much.
a whole ode to it, and you know, I'm sure you know this, but I am lucky to get like the PR mailer version of the book, and it came with 2 jars of Better Than Bouillon, like, which I assume is not sponsored. You just like bought us jars of bouillon.
They just, my publisher, they, I guess they just asked. What happened? They showed them the essay?
Yeah, exactly. Like Julia loves Better Than Bouillon.
Julia's publicist says yes. They just asked Better Than
It
Bouillon.
was the marketing team at the publisher.
Yes.
Reached out to Better Than Bouillon, and they're like,
Yeah.
we would love to see.
Yeah.
God, so you now have an official
I
relationship
think
with them.
Brittany from Flatiron.
Are they going to put you on the
No.
label like a box of Wheaties?
Okay, so basically, okay, I will just say, I know this is being recorded, so I should be careful what I say. Okay, Anthony Prowski from Queer Eye, I love, and we're friendly, and he's such a sweet man, and I just want his job, which includes not just being on Queer Eye, but he is the spokesperson for Better Than Bouillon. Like if you go to their Instagram, it's just him, and I'm not as good looking as he is, but like I feel like I would love to do it.
You got the
There's room for
cheekbones.
both of
You
us.
got the
Oh,
cheekbones.
Maybe I can bench press more than him. I don't know.
Bench press him.
I could. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes, right here in the front.
First of all, thank you. I love your cookbooks. One thing I've noticed, especially with Simply Julia, and now from what I've done with this one thing I really appreciate about your recipes is they're also less expensive at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how much that was something you were actively thinking about, or sort of has that been an evolution for you?
Yeah.
Just to repeat the question is that often Julia's recipes are less expensive at the grocery store, which is something we all appreciate. And was that intentional? How did you evolve into that?
Yeah. We went on a hike together,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. You do look so familiar. So yes, intentional, but not in. I don't make my recipes. I don't try to make them affordable, just to do that. I mean, it's just true to how I live, and I also just feel like. I just think cooking at home is so important for all the reasons we got to talk about, and your questions really allowed that. And I just think one thing that doesn't happen enough is the acknowledgement of just how much labor it is. And it's so much, it's not just, the cooking's the fun part. The shopping, the planning, the budgeting, the, putting away of leftovers, the remembering to eat the leftovers, the, considering what everyone in the household is, into or not into, or this or that. And then the money of it all. It's expensive to feed ourselves, whether we're cooking or getting food from elsewhere. So I just feel like that anyone buys my book to me is a really big deal, and that they take the time to make a recipe feels like a really big deal. They're taking time, and then they're spending money on ingredients. I mean, the fact that some of you have done that and then choose to come here, this is a very big deal. So I just feel like the money of it all, kind of the body stuff of it all, it's important to acknowledge, especially because I feel like I write you know, I'm a home cook who writes for other home cooks. Like, I'm writing stuff for this day-to-day stuff, like not so much the special occasion things. So I feel like keeping it affordable is important because that's important for all of us, like no matter where we are financially. And I just think that, yeah, I just try to make my work as accessible as I can. So financial accessibility is definitely part of it. But yeah, thanks for that question.
I think that's all we've got time for. Thank
So
you,
so
Julia.
fast.
I know, this was such a delight.
Yeah, this was great.
Julia's going to be signing books back there, as Bex told us before. There is a lovely person pointing at where Julia's going to be. Wait, do the pointing again. Yeah, there we go. This was so much fun for me. Thank you for being amazing. This book is so good.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Julia and Helen for being with us tonight. So for the live stream, you can buy a link in the live stream description. If you're here, you can buy a book at the front, and you should. We have a no book left behind policy. If you want to order more, and you can't order more unless you buy them all from us. I don't know if you've heard, but it's November. There's a lot of holidays. I know we just passed a lot of holidays, but there's more coming up. And there's just so many people you can buy books for, including yourself. And I really encourage you to do it, because that's what you're here for. Yes, my coworker Ben is pointing to where Julia will be signing. It'll be so great. We also have Simply Julia, so if you want more than one cookbook, you should buy them. Take out those credit cards. We also accept cash. Thank you all so much.